To start off today, pastor's going to employ pastor's prerogative and break the rules. We're going to have an auction. Pastor needs a little Christmas spending money. I have in my hand a hat, but not just any hat. Trivia question. Who is the quarterback in college football that won 4 bowl games? It's right here. Pat White. The only quarterback in Division I that has won 4 bowl games. I have this hat thanks to a man named Berger that was playing for the Miami Dolphins when Pat White was drafted. So this hat is worth a lot of money. So we're going to have an auction. We're going to start, and then it'll go up. So I want $500. Who's got $500 for this hat? Okay, $550. $550? $550. $550. $600. It's going good. It's going better than wow, way in the back. $600. It's going better than I thought. Let's go $800. $800. Man, we're going to have to quit. I'll split it between you guys. We'll cut in half. Chris and Cheeto sold. Each get half a hat, $400 a piece. Yeah, right. All right. Well, I don't know what I seriously could get. I'm going to hold these guys to this. But I don't really want to give up my hat, I guess. But I probably would take $800 for it. I'd have to think about that. But anyway, I might be able to get $500. I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, what's going on here? Well, it was October 15, 2005, and this probably doesn't mean anything to anybody except me. But that's another story. West Virginia University in football was playing the University of Louisville. Starting quarterback Adam Bednarik got hurt. West Virginia was down 17 points in the fourth quarter. And in stepped Pat White to quarterback the team the rest of that game. He rallied the team to tie the game at the end of the fourth quarter, scoring 17 unanswered points, I believe anyway. Anyway, they tied the game at the end of the regulation. And after 3 overtimes, West Virginia came out victorious, 46-44. And the Pat White, 4-time bowl game winning quarterback's career had begun. He got his big break when Adam Bednarik got hurt. Well, what in the world does this have to do with Joseph as we turn back to Genesis this morning? Well, let's take a look. Remember where we last saw Joseph. He was in prison with the hopes of getting out. He had interpreted a dream of one of the fellow prisoners, actually 2 of them, but the one was hanged, as you recall, so that's kind of out. But the one positive that was restored to his position of being the cupbearer, the butler of the Pharaoh, close connection with the Pharaoh, he hoped that because of interpreting his dream and him being restored to his position, that he would put in a good word for Joseph. But the butler forgot Joseph. Still languishing, and that's not really fair, but still in prison, wishing he wasn't there. Let's put it that way. Still wishing he wasn't there, but still in prison, and we got to jump ahead. 2 whole years. We got to move ahead 2 years from that time when Joseph is still in prison. Well, it came to pass, Genesis 41:1 tells us, Genesis 41:1, it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and he was standing by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kind cattle and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other cattle came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, kind of sickly looking and thin, and stood by the other cattle on the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed cattle did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kind. Then Pharaoh awoke. Pharaoh had 2 dreams. That was the first one. There was a river, and of course, Egypt, which is where we're located. As Joseph, as you know, has been sold into Egypt as a slave. It ends up in prison there. Egypt is known for the river. That's what generates the economy, basically, of Egypt, or at least I think it still does, I believe. But anyway, there was by the river there, and 7 cattle were in the river getting cool and getting rid of the flies and all that kind of stuff. And they came up very good-looking cattle. Well, lo and behold, 7 not so very good-looking cattle come up and devour the 7 big ones. That was his first dream. There's a second dream. And he slept. He finally went back to sleep in verse 5 and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good, really good. And behold, 7 thin ears that had been blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke. And it was a dream, he realized. The second dream is kind of similar in some ways, very different in some other ways. But 7 ears form a picturesque Thanksgiving stalk. Very nice looking stalk of grain. 7 not so nice looking, pretty yucky looking, sad looking, dried up looking, thin and not very productive come along and devour the 7 good-looking ones. He wakes up, now apparently too disturbed to go back to sleep. And as you know, the Egyptians took dreams far more seriously than we do, as a rule. But these dreadful dreams cannot be good. But what do they mean? Kind of ominous, the good cattle being eaten. Not, cattle aren't known for eating cattle. In case you didn't know that. I think you did. Kind of ominous. Wow, what's going to happen here? So Pharaoh calls in the experts, the magicians, the wise men, we might say the philosophers, to interpret his dreams. But alas, no one could interpret those dreams. Not that difficult of dreams compared to some at least, but no one could interpret. And so now Pharaoh and his advisors are all becoming distraught with these dreams. Well, Pharaoh's butler is there on the scene. He's always pretty close to Pharaoh, or a lot of the times. And this kind of is causing an uproar apparently in the palace there, in the gathering place, wherever they were. And something stirs his memory, sparks his memory. I remember just 2 years ago, that guy in prison, that Joseph, that Hebrew guy, Joseph. He had interpreted a dream for me and for the baker. He told us what those dreams meant that we had each individually, and lo and behold, they became true. They came true. I wonder if Joseph could interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And so he goes to Pharaoh and tells the Pharaoh what had happened just 2 years prior in the prison. Well, that piqued Pharaoh's interest, as you can imagine. Bring Joseph immediately. And so they get Joseph cleaned up and get him a new garment to put on, get him out of prison, of course. And he comes to appear before Pharaoh. And so Joseph appeared before Pharaoh to interpret those dreams, whether he knew that right off the bat or as soon as he got there. But verse 14 tells him they took him out of the dungeon, they shaved him, got him cleaned up and changed his clothes. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, 15, I've dreamed a dream, no one can interpret it, and I've heard say of thee, thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. Notice how Joseph responds. It is not in me. Nothing I can do for you, Pharaoh. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And he says that again in verse 25. God has showed Pharaoh what God is about to do. In verse 28, yet again. What God is about to do, he's showing to Pharaoh. And so while Joseph had become known as one who could interpret dreams, he made it clear that only as God revealed to him could he interpret a dream. And this was what God was going to do in history, in Egypt. Now that's a pretty bold proclamation. Here's Pharaoh. He wasn't exactly a god, but the representative of the gods of Egypt. And here is Joseph facing the most powerful, literally the most powerful man in the whole world, who's sort of looked at as a god, not quite really, but a representative of their gods. And he says, God will tell you, and this is what God is going to do. Is there a lesson there for us? Pretty obvious. You know, sometimes we don't think we're much. Most of the time, maybe we don't think we're much, and in a sense, we're not. But when God is living in us, and God wants to use us, and He does, makes all the difference, of course. Well, Joseph gives glory to God. That bold declaration that God will interpret these dreams, and Joseph will tell Pharaoh what God is going to do. Well, Pharaoh explains the dreams again. He adds a detail that we didn't see before. The skinny cows, when they ate the fat cows, that didn't make them any healthier looking. They were still yucky looking cows. But he gave the details of the dreams to Joseph. And Joseph instantly responds to these dreams. And Joseph said, jump down to 25, the dream of Pharaoh is one. While there was clearly two dreams, if you will, the first dream with the cattle, the second dream with the stalks, and they were separated. He woke up, went back to sleep. Joseph says they're the same dream, basically. Even though there's clearly two dreams, you're basically dreaming the same thing. And this is just to let you know that God has established for sure this is what's going to happen. There's no doubts. That's why he gave you the two dreams. That this is what God has determined. This is what God has decided. This is what God is going to bring about in the immediate future. And you know the interpretation, but the 7 healthy-looking cows in the crop, the 7, they represented years. 7 years of abundance, of plenty. God was going to bless Egypt with productive crops for 7 years. There would be a bumper crop in all these, whatever they grew. It would be a prosperous time. But at the end of those 7 years are going to follow 7 miserable years when it comes to agriculture. There's going to be drought, presumably, or anyhow, there's not going to be crops to speak of, hardly at all. A famine. 7-year-long famine. Now, in our modern world, if we had a 7-year severe famine, we'd be hurting. Now, we could withstand a year or two a lot better today, or 3 maybe. A famine of 1 year was close to devastation in the ancient world, if not devastation. A 1-year famine could have caused starvation for numerous people. Still could today in many lands. 7 years of famine are going to follow those 7 bountiful years. It's going to be miserable. People will be hurting big time at the end or through that period of time. And so Joseph interprets the dream, but he continues with his personal advice. And I don't know, I wish I did, if the Lord told him to tell Pharaoh this, or this was based on his own wisdom that he had gained through the years. But he gives him advice. What should Pharaoh do as a result? Verse 33. This is what you ought to do, Pharaoh. Therefore now, Pharaoh, look out for a man discreet and wise, and set him over all of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint all officers over the land, and take the 5th part, a 20% tax, on the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years of all the crops. Take 20% each of those years. Gather all the food of those good years that come, and store them up. Lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh. Let them keep food in the cities, all across the region, all across the land. In all the cities, store the produce, the 20% increase, the tax, if you will, of Pharaoh. Store it over these next 7 years, so there will be an abundance, a supply for the 7 years of famine that will immediately follow. Joseph's insight is widely recognized. Wow, that interpretation makes sense. That he must know what he's talking about. The 7 plentiful years and then the 7 not plentiful years. And that sounds like a great plan. We need to just get ready. God is telling us, even though it's going to be a miserable 7 years, he's providing for us if we just take a good if we design a good strategy, a good plan to prepare for those 7 lean, very lean years that are coming. And you can just kind of see the wheels churning behind the scene. Boy, I hope Pharaoh picks me. I hope Pharaoh picks me. I'd love to be that great official for Pharaoh. That's what a lot of those advisors are thinking, I think. They're looking for a big promotion, an opportunity. But what happens? 37. The thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Great idea, great interpretation, great plan. And Pharaoh said, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Who can we find like this man that interpreted this dream, that gave advice about how to handle these next 14 years? Can we find anybody better? Well, I know what they wanted to say, but they didn't dare say it. They wanted to say, well, how about me, Pharaoh? But you don't do that with the Pharaoh. And so Joseph, God, inasmuch as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house 40, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater. Joseph is granted, I think, the highest promotion of all time. Or maybe you could think of one that would rival it. That's not the point. But he's a foreign slave in prison. No future. No hope. Just could end up the rest of his years in that prison. He's doing, as far as being in prison, he's doing very well, but, nobody wants to be in prison. He doesn't want to be there. He might end his life, however long he lives, in that prison. And in a blink of an eye almost, he becomes nearly the most powerful man in the world. Second only to the most powerful man in the world of his day, the Pharaoh. That's quite a promotion. That's quite a promotion. From a slave to one of the most powerful, the second most powerful man in the world. In a moment of time, Joseph's trajectory changes. He got his break when Pharaoh had a dream or two. Two dreams that were basically the same. Things haven't been going well. He couldn't catch a break for nothing. And now, as we'd say it, his big break. As God, a better way to say it, as God is developing his plan, working his plan, and working in Joseph's situation. But he has big responsibilities ahead. A nationwide effort to collect a bounty of crops. A nationwide effort to tax people. That doesn't usually go over well, right? People don't like increased taxes. A plan that would prepare Egypt for the hard times coming. Well, what do we learn from this great chapter, well-known chapter in the Bible? Well, three things come to my mind, and I'm certainly not saying that exhausts the list. But kind of aside, we mentioned Proverbs 15:1. I mentioned Proverbs 17:1. How about Proverbs 21:1? Says this: the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, God turns the king's heart wherever he wills. That's kind of an aside, but in the midst of all the political angst and upheaval that we hear about and talk about way too often, we're to pray for our leaders, right? Maybe we could pray, God, would you put in their mind to do something wise? Because they're really in your hands, God. Now that's talking about mysteries. You know, why does God allow rulers to do what they do as their representatives of His? You know, that's a very complex question and issue. How God uses sometimes very wicked rulers, and sometimes He does or allows very wicked things through those rulers. But they're in His hands. It reminds me and comforts me to know that while so many things are happening in America and around the world, for that matter, that are against God, that are against common sense even, that are against godliness, they're still in God's hands. And God is accomplishing His purposes. Poor Joseph. The Lord was with him, so he got forgotten. The Lord was with him, so he got thrown in prison. The Lord was with him, so he got sold as a slave. Wait a minute here. Didn't like that story so well. But the Lord had Joseph in His hands, and he got his big break. Quote. But the king, the Pharaoh, is in the Lord's hands too. Well, pray for God's will to be done as our leaders rule. But secondly, and more specifically, be ready. Be ready. Now, I don't know if there's anybody here that's hoping for their big break, whatever that may mean. Don't look for a big break necessarily. Now, God may grant that for His purposes. But Joseph had been in years of training, and the training was not easy, right? But he thrived. He became a powerful leader within his small circle. As the servant of Potiphar, and as a prisoner, he became a leader. He thrived in that small circle as he made the best of every situation. He was hoping for a break. Now, I don't think it was anything like this when he was in prison. His break was, this guy, tell Pharaoh, get me out of here. But he was forgotten at first. But he was, while he hoped for a break to get out of prison, who wouldn't? He was just being faithful, learning, growing, becoming more and more capable as a leader. God had some big plans for Joseph. And probably nobody here is going to be the second most powerful person on earth, though that's not out of the question. It is in our minds, right? But if that's what God has for you, who knows? Doubtful from our side. But God does have big plans for you. Are you ready? And are you growing? And maybe you're not right where you wish you were today. And I don't know where you'll be tomorrow. But God does. And are we preparing ourselves and being faithful? And maybe, our plans aren't God's plans. That's possible, certainly. But what's important? God's plan or my plan? I hope you'll say God's plan, right? And so we need to make the most of our life wherever that is. And thirdly, and probably obvious, and we've probably brought it out a bit already, but know that God's preparation is often hard. You ever go through hard times? Challenges? I can't handle this. They're trying to dump this on me at work. I don't want to fool with that. It's going to be hard, and I got to work with these cantankerous people over in that part of the shop, that part of the plant. I don't really want that. Do you think God might have a plan for that? Might have a purpose to help you to develop? And in His church, more specifically for our purposes, what have you been challenged, or should you have been challenged to perform, to do, to serve? Maybe there's a person that God has laid on your heart, and they're kind of cantankerous, but they need a word from God. And you're the one to bring that word. God is preparing you for greater responsibility, greater effectiveness in serving Him. So keep growing. Stop resisting those hard times and those challenges that you'd rather just have the easy button. Stop resisting. Keep growing. Keep learning. Know that God is with you. Make the most of every opportunity, even when the preparation is hard. Has Joseph been adequately prepared? Will he measure up to this huge promotion? A lot on the line here for him personally. The whole world, literally, is on the line for how well Joseph performs this role. Has he been adequately prepared? He did get out of prison as he hoped, but sometimes I wonder, is he going to live to regret that just a little bit? Well, I'm out of prison, but I'm not ready for this. Well, we'll see soon. So come back next time. Father, thank you for how you've worked in Joseph's life. That you were with him through the hard times, and they were hard. Prison. Being forgotten, falsely accused, mistreated, sold as a slave. Hard times like very few of us have known, with maybe a couple of exceptions for the most part. But you were developing, preparing, molding, shaping, getting rid of the rough edges, preparing Joseph for a task beyond anybody's even imagination, talking about beyond what we could even imagine. As you were going to do some things worldwide to show your power, to show your greatness, and yes, to show your grace, your care, even for the enemies of God in some cases. Lord, forgive us for our resisting, as we're so prone to do. We want it so easy and comfortable and convenient here in America especially. We do have so much. But sometimes we have to learn, and we don't learn easily very, very well, very often. We need some hard times and some challenges. Help us to stop resisting. Helps to continue to grow, to continue to find wisdom from above, from your word, that we can make good choices, maybe good advice to others, as Joseph did, and that we can thrive wherever you place us. Thrive not because we get a lot of money or a lot of fame or anything like that, but thrive because you are glorified. You are the one that accomplishes what needs to be done. So help us to lean upon you harder too, knowing that you're in control and you're working your plan in our life, as you did in Joseph's. Thank you for this reminder. In Jesus' name, amen.